I'm really excited to take on this course with you here today, because prayer is such an important part of our spirituality, but yet it's so oft misunderstood. As a rabbi, I know that so much of what we do as Jewish people involves prayer and communal prayer. Our Jewish lives are centered around the synagogue, which is a house of prayer, effectively. But at the same time, so many of us are just disconnected. We can't connect with prayer. Does that mean there's something wrong with us? Or there's something wrong with the prayer? Or something wrong with the mechanism? That's the journey that we're going to be taking in this series. I'm really excited to take it to do this journey together with you, where we'll hope to spiritualize our Judaism, to infuse our prayer with relevance and meaning, making it something that I don't have to do, but I actually want to do. That would be nice, right? If we actually had a reason and a purpose. If we found relevance in that prayer. What we're going to be doing over the next 6 sessions is, first of all, today we're going to be talking about the psychology, the purpose of prayer, the general mechanism of prayer, and its problems, the pathology of prayer. A lot of our problems that we have with prayer we're going to hopefully deal with today. And then next week we'll talk more about the asking of prayer. It's not very spiritual, that you're constantly asking for things in our prayer. If you think about the Amida, the silent Amida, is 18 requests. We're constantly asking for things. That doesn't seem very spiritual. But after that, we'll spend 3 sessions analyzing the main components of prayer with their specific meditations. So we'll actually be able to identify with the spiritual progression, which is the prayer, the spiritual anatomy of prayer. And finally, at the very end, we'll have a discussion about why all of this spirituality has to take place in a public setting. Wouldn't prayer be so much more meaningful on your own in the middle of the field, up on a mountaintop, maybe on a desert, on a beautiful island somewhere? That's a place to become spiritual. Why do we have to do this inside of a synagogue and together with a congregation, together with a community? So each one of these sessions will be accompanied with a very practical meditation. Many of you have heard Label Wolf, who we've brought here from Australia. He's a very famous Kabbalist, a modern thinker who brings the ancient Kabbalistic wisdom down to earth. And we're going to have virtual meditations with him throughout each of the sessions to be able to give us something tangible, something to sink our teeth into, to try to leave each session with something that we can actually utilize and meditate upon. I found as a rabbi that many Jews are surprised that Judaism has anything to do with meditation. Anybody heard of this? Anybody feel this way? Surprised that Judaism has anything to do with meditation? Yeah. You do find that surprising, right? Yes. Actually, Judaism is all about meditation. In fact, the very word Chabad is actually an acronym for 3 words: Chochmah, Bina, Da'at, which is wisdom, understanding, and realization. These are the 3 steps of intellectual processing. Anytime you want to take an idea and make it yours, you want to take something from a book and make it your own, you have to first have the flash of inspiration, that's chokhmah, wisdom. Then you have to understand it. You have to sort of go through the motions and the details. And once you've got through bina, you've understood it, it's still not mine. I don't own it yet. In order to own it, you've got to reach the 3rd level. Beyond understanding, you've got to hit realization. You've got to make it real. It's got to be personal. The only way you can do that, Torah tells us, is through meditating upon it. The only way you can take something from an idea which you understand to something which you feel and breathe, is to go from comprehension to realization, from bina to da'at, is through meditation. This is a critical component of our Jewish identity. In fact, the very name Chabad, who we are, shows you how important that meditation is. But let's do all of that within the context of our prayer. I just want to start off with a quick poem, which is quite famous, but I thought it'd be a nice way to introduce the subject. I got up early one morning and rushed right into the day. I had so much to accomplish that I didn't have time to pray. Problems just tumbled about me, and heavier came each task. Why doesn't God help me, I wondered. He answered, you didn't ask. I wanted to see joy and beauty, but the day toiled on, gray and bleak. I wondered why God didn't show me. He said, but you didn't seek. I tried to come into God's presence. I used all my keys at the lock. God gently and lovingly chided, my child, you didn't knock. I woke up early this morning and paused before entering the day. I had so much to accomplish that I had to take time to pray. So we're just coming back from the Western Wall, and that's a nice poem. It sounds good, right? We're just coming back from the Western Wall in Jerusalem. We had a big contingency here from the shul, and it's a good story out of the Western Wall that we just celebrated 52 years of the reunification of Jerusalem after the 6-Day War, and CNN wanted to run a story on on the Western Wall. They find a guy that's been praying there every day, 3 times a day for 50 years. Since, 67. They say, excuse me, sir, Moshe Goldstein, tell us, is it true you've been praying here every day for 50 years? Yes, 3 times a day. Tell us, what are you praying for? He says, I'm praying for peace in the Middle East. Really, they say. Well, how do you feel about your prayer for peace in the Middle East after 50 years? How do you feel about where we're at? He says, I feel like I'm talking to a wall. So prayer, whilst very spiritual, is most difficult and perhaps one of the most misunderstood aspects of Judaism today. Much more than just a language barrier, which is obviously the most obvious problem when you walk into a synagogue and the prayer is in a foreign language that you don't speak. That's already getting off on the wrong foot. But beyond that, it's so much deeper, is our emotional disconnect with what's going on over here. When you walk into the synagogue and somebody hands you a book with 350 pages, it's a little intimidating. Are we going to read all these words today? That's crazy. When the kids came to my house for trick-or-treat, and they opened, the kids on the block, and they opened the door and they see this bookshelf with hundreds of books. One of the kids says to the other, gee, so many sitters, so many prayer books. Like, what are these guys doing all day long? They must be praying all day long. But I forget what I was saying. Doesn't matter. Okay. Anyways, so we're going to try to identify the emotional theme underlying the purpose of prayer. I'd like to start off with a story. Story about the first Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. He lived about 250 years ago. Happens to be my great-grandfather, 9 generations ago. I visited his granddaughter in Hebron a few weeks ago. And when he was ready to take his Torah study to the next level, he was faced with the following dilemma. He could either go to Vilna, which was the location of the Vilna Gaon. You may have heard of the Vilna Gaon. It was a brilliant Torah teacher. Or he could go to Mezrich, where there was the seat of Hasidic Torah study. The Maggid of Mezrich was the successor of the famous Baal Shem Tov. Here was the seat of Torah study in Vilna, and here was the seat of Hasidus and the Hasidic way of life. So here's what he said. He said, in Vilna, I can learn how to learn. Now, he obviously knew already how to learn. He was a brilliant Torah scholar. He was already proficient in the Torah backwards and forwards. He was obviously taking it to a level which we can't really relate to, right? But he said, if I go to Vilna, to the genius of Vilna, he'll teach me how to learn Torah. But if I go to Mezrich, I'll learn how to pray. To learn how to learn, I know a little bit. To learn how to pray, I almost have no idea. And it was that decision that led him to make the move, to decide to go to Mezrich, where he ultimately became not only the greatest disciple of the Maggid of Mezrich, he actually became his successor, ultimately founding and establishing the Chabad movement, which I spoke about moments ago. There was 7 subsequent Chabad Rebbes. The 7th Rebbe of the Chabad movement is Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. You may have heard of him, from Brooklyn, New York. Passed away in 1994. So, one thing we learn from the story is that prayer is not just something which comes naturally to us. It's an acquired skill. That's what it is. It's an acquired skill. It's something which you actually need to learn. So if you walk into a synagogue and somebody hands you a book and you feel a little lost, overwhelmed, out of touch, that's okay. It's normal. This is a skill that you actually need to learn how to daven, how to pray. And that's what we're going to be doing in this course. It's not that you just open a book and you automatically just go with the flow. It doesn't happen like that. That's actually what I was trying to say before. I've been lobbying in the Chabad movement to try to have the prayer book reduced. When somebody walks into synagogue today, you give them a prayer book, which is the entire prayers of the entire year. I would give them 25 pages, which is all that you need for this specific service. It's a lot less intimidating, a lot less welcoming if you don't have to hold a brick in your hand and you're holding just a little book, which is a little more user-friendly. So I'm working on that psychology as well. And that's what we're here to do today. Hey guys, here's what we're going to do today, is to try and learn the philosophy, the feeling, the reason, the rationale underlying prayer, what it means to learn how to pray. Okay? Before we do this, as we get started, I'd like to ask you to please join me in the textbook that you should have in front of you with an exercise. I'd like to ask you to fill this exercise out on your own. Just answer this very simple question of why do you pray? That's the question. Very straightforward. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. Whatever answer you want. And you don't even have to share your answers if you don't want to. Just to get us thinking, to get to squeeze the lemon up here. Yeah, it's on page 2 actually. Page 2 in the textbook. And the question, it's an exercise 1.1. The question is, why do you pray? If you could just write down your answer on your sheet. As you're thinking, I'd like to ask if anybody would like to share your thoughts on this. Why do you pray? Anybody have suggestions? Corey?
I pray daily to thank Hashem for all the blessings I have.
So you pray in order to express gratitude?
Yes.
Great. Nice. Anybody else? Yes, Susan.
I pray to express gratitude and to make sure that I'm on the right track in my life and accomplishing my mission.
How does prayer help you make sure that you're accomplishing your mission?
Communication with God.
Communication. You're sort of checking in.
Yeah, checking in to make sure it's
Interesting.
anything that I'm missing. and
Nice.
What should I be doing?
So you're sort of
Get
conversing,
my
having a chat.
Get my marching orders.
I like that. Good. Okay, anybody else? Anybody else? Why do you pray?
For the welfare of others.
For the welfare of?
Others.
For the welfare of others. You know, it's interesting, Stan. I found that a lot of people that I talk to have an aversion to praying for themselves. They don't want to ask for themselves. Oh, I don't need to ask for myself. I'll pray for my kids. I'll pray for my family. Pray for the Jewish people, for the soldiers. But for me, I don't feel comfortable praying for me. It's very interesting, right? And you just said that subliminally by saying you pray for the welfare of others. But you're basically praying in order to petition. You're asking for stuff, right? You're petitioning, right? Good. Whether it's for you or for others is an interesting discussion. Anybody else? Any other ideas to share? Charlotte?
For shalom.
For shalom, so you're petitioning for peace. Diane?
So I get closer to God.
to get closer to God. How does prayer do that for you?
You're communicating with God, and so you're, asking or thanking, and it definitely brings you closer. So it's not doing it all.
Right. Good stuff. This is great. Beautiful. Very nice ideas here. Sam, last one.
I pray out of fear.
Fear.
Yes, as a very last resort.
Ooh. Thanks for a very honest answer. So in other words, there's no atheists in foxholes, right? You're saying that if you're praying, it's not a good sign. But you're right. You're effectively saying if you've exhausted all other resources, you turn to prayer. At least that. But let's see if we can make prayer a little bit more primary, potentially. Let's see if we can give it a little bit more of a primary position today. Let's see if we can do this. Good stuff. Thank you for those very beautiful answers. Let's move on to the next question. A little more challenging in its nature. The next question is, what do you find difficult about prayer? I'd like you to take a moment to just think about this. What do you find difficult about prayer? Susan.
Take the time from our daily life, as you were saying before, and just concentrate on prayer. I do it when I walk the dog in the morning and I watch the sunrise.
So you're saying that just carving out the time is I happen to agree with you on that very much, because we live in such a distracted world. There's billions of dollars being spent every moment on our attention, and wherever we look, someone's trying to get our attention. So I find that also very challenging to be able to focus on anything. It's like it was actually Adolf Hitler, may his name be erased and blotted out, who said, "How fortunate are we that so few men actually think." Isn't that interesting, right? Anyone else? What else do you find difficult about prayer? Anybody? Corey?
Well, when I do ask for something specific, I do get frustrated that as years go by, the only answer I get is no answer.
Maybe the answer is no.
That's right. But I refuse to accept that.
Right, you don't take no for an answer.
Silence is the answer.
Sam, Stanley.
Very, very similarly, is God hearing my prayers?
Right, so the question is he really...
No feedback. You don't get any input.
You find no feedback?
Well, sometimes the no answer is your answer.
That's an interesting question. So it's more of a fundamental question about whether God actually exists or not. And that is, where you wonder if he's actually listening because you don't really get the feedback. I just want to tell you, in my experience, that prayer, when you turn to God for things, it doesn't come like right away. But if you look carefully in the rearview mirror, hindsight, and you see how things sort of panned out, you're like, hey, that's kind of interesting. That's a little too providential, than just randomness. Anybody else? Any other problems, challenges, issues that you have with your personal Jewish prayer? Elaine?
Concentrating.
Concentrate. All right, good. Like Susan? How about you, Charlotte?
Also, to be able to focus, to begin to prayer, but the important thing I feel is how to connect with God.
Because it's a little abstract.
And see his everyday miracles.
Right, so you're struggling it's a little too lofty, maybe, a little too abstract, ethereal. We can sink our teeth into a pizza, but to get engaged in prayer might not be that easy. Is that what you're saying?
No.
No? Okay. Okay.
I'm saying that I am learning not only how to connect with God, to focus on prayer, but to see that every day is a miracle.
So putting things into perspective. Okay, good. Andy, were you going to say something? Or Hannah? No? What about, Susan?
I don't have any trouble on my own, in my own house. And,
Right.
praying. When I come to synagogue, it's the language.
Oh, I'm waiting for somebody. I'm like dealing with Hebrew speakers here or something.
But as I go, I don't know, I read the English part. But by reading
losing something, because when I just listen,
Hmm.
I'm getting different feelings.
Different vibrations.
Yeah, but if I'm just listening, I don't really know what's going on.
Right.
I don't understand. I'm studying Hebrew, but I'll be dead by the time.
No, but you're very honest. You're like, listen, you walk into a room and they're speaking in ancient Babylonian or something. It's getting difficult to connect with what's going on over here. You know what I mean? It's like you feel a little left out of the party, and that's the problem. Is it essential to pray in Hebrew? Do you have to pray in Hebrew? No?
Well,
But
that's
if you are in
it's a higher level.
What was that?
But if you are in a synagogue where we are all Jews and they are all praying in Hebrew, you better.
Well, we're going to discuss this. Bob, what do you say?
Now, I'm not sure I can really articulate this, but there's a sense of prayer that I have.
Right.
When I come to Minyan anymore, when there's community, and you do it together, and you repeat the same prayers over and over again, both within the Minyan and then tomorrow in the same Minyan, and there's a power, you get like a deeper understanding, maybe a calmness, connection, but there's something going on.
There's something there. You can't put your finger on it.
No, I can't.
Me neither. And you know what? I missed Minion this morning, by the way.
I know.
Confession, right? But I didn't. I have to tell you, it was a different energy for me. Different energy, because when I davened on my own, when I prayed on my own later, wasn't the same thing. The fact that we have our place in our group, there's something to be said about that energy. We'll be talking about that in later on in the course. All right, good. So let me move it on. I want to keep it moving here. So finally, I want to ask you one final question. If you might share what you might be looking for in this course, what would you hope to achieve in the course that discusses Jewish spirituality and prayer and meditation?
Able to meditate on my own, have a way of doing it that I can do it daily.
Great. So if you were able to emerge in this course with the ability to meditate on your own, be happy.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Anybody else? What would you like to achieve? What would you like to find as a result of this course to make it successful, worthwhile, worth your time?
You'd like to find shalom.
Shalom, peace. Interesting. Shalom with who?
With yourself.
Who said that?
With you.
Ronnie, nice. Shalom with yourself. How interesting.
The first,
I just have to process this. Sorry, Ron, what were you saying?
I was going to say, before I start in the morning, even a minute worth of meditation helps me find that.
So are you suggesting, Ronnie and Ron over here, Ronnie and Ron, are you suggesting that you're not at peace with yourself?
No, I am.
So why did you say shalom with yourself?
I'm not looking for that in this class. I'm looking to see what the whole subject matter is. I don't have a destination. I don't have a...
Oh, so you don't have a clear destination. You're going with the flow right now.
Exactly.
You're just rolling with the punches. No worries. But I like your answer anyways. You said shalom with yourself.
Right.
You did say that, right?
Yes, but I have that.
So why would you suggest that it comes through prayer if you have it already?
You, for other people.
For other people. All right. For the rest of us. No worries. Sounds good. I can very much identify with that one too. So let's get straight into it. Just a few questions to get us thinking over here. But let's get straight into it. Let's try to understand what is prayer, what's going on in here, what's this thing all about, what's the hype, and maybe what's the misconception all about, all right? So like anything else, which we Jews do, our Torah, we always look to the Torah for guidance. You see, the word Torah is very similar to your first grade teacher. What did you call your first grade Hebrew teacher? Mora, right? Mora. Remember Mora? You had a Mora? A Mora, right? A Mora is a teacher. And Torah is the same exact word. It's a teacher, it's a life coach, it's a life guide. It's not just a history book. It's not just a book of laws. The Torah is our guide. It's the GPS of our souls. It's the guidance system of our souls. So we have to look, anytime we want to understand something, we want to understand what something really is, we have to see how God articulated it within the Torah. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to analyze two stories. One will take us back to the prayer of a woman. This woman is actually, her prayer is responsible for the vast majority of the laws of prayer today because of the prayer that we're about to uncover. Hannah lived just south of 3,000 years ago in the year 932 BCE. Okay, 932 BCE. She lived in ancient Israel. And she was married to her husband Elkanah, and she was infertile. No kids. They must have had interesting fertility philosophies in those days, because at one point when she gave up on having kids, she suggested to her husband that maybe he take upon himself a second wife. And if he takes upon himself a second wife, then maybe she'll conceive as well. The logic here was that by Hannah allowing another woman to have children, she would be benefiting the same blessing, right? By giving another woman the ability to have kids. Gail, if you want the chairs over here. If you want to give, by allowing this other woman to have kids, she would also be finding the ability to have her own kids as well, without getting into the ethics and the philosophy of polygamy, bigamy, and this particular fertility treatment. She encourages her husband Elkanah to marry Penina. So now there's two wives in the picture. Two wives, there's like sisters, there's brothers. In Hebrew, do you know what the word is for the relationship between two women married to the same man? What do you call it? Nuts. Two women married to the same man in Hebrew is called tsaris. It's a real word. It's called my tsaris. My tsaris did this, my tsaris did that. They're tsaris. They're each other's tsaris. So what is your tsaris doing? What's my tsaris doing? That's what it is. So Hannah allows her husband to marry Penina. Penina makes her life miserable because Penina conceives right away. She has a child right away. And another child, and another child, and another child. She has 10 sons, one after the other. And she makes Hannah's life miserable. She constantly asks Hannah, she says, "Oh, Hannah, I see you're already having a cup of coffee in the morning. Did you send all the kids to school today already? Did you sign the reports? Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot you don't have kids." And she really made her life miserable. She tormented Hannah to the point that Hannah was driven to do what nobody had done before. She went to the tabernacle. It wasn't yet the temple in Jerusalem. The tabernacle was in Shiloh, was the temporary temple. And there she goes on the festival, and she stands silently at the wall of the tabernacle, and she starts to pray, moving her lips, but no audible sound is heard. Until this time, nobody did this. She was the first person to do this. Jewish prayer. This is the moment it begins. Our godly service involved animal sacrifices, animal offerings. Without getting into the ethics of that, that's a whole different semester. We'll deal with that another time. But let's analyze her actual prayer here on page number 3. Here it is in the book of Samuel. There was a man. We actually read the story on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. Right? The story of Hannah and her prayer. There was a man from Ramatayim Tzofim in the hill country of Ephraim. His name was Elkanah. He had 2 wives. One was named Hannah. The other one was named Penina. Penina had children, but Hannah was childless. Hannah was embittered. She prayed to God and wept profusely. She vowed, "God of the many heavenly and worldly beings, look upon your servant's misery and remember me. Do not forget your servant and give me a son. If you do this, I will dedicate him to God all the days of his life." Hannah was praying in her heart. Her lips were moving, but her voice was silent. It's a beautiful story without getting into all the details that are not necessarily relevant to the discussion on prayer. That's the introduction. So she's really heartfelt about her supplication. She really wants a son. She ultimately did. Within a year, she merited to have the birth of the very famous prophet Samuel, Shmuel, who ultimately coronated the first king of Israel, Saul, and the second king of Israel, King David. Very important personality. As you drive up to Jerusalem on the far left, you see a mountaintop called Nebe Samuel with a little tower on top. That is where Nebe Samuel is Arabic for Prophet Samuel, and that's where his home is. So let's look at the second prayer now, the prayer of King David. This one is a lot more famous. We recite it every Friday night. You'll often hear it at funerals. It's Psalm 23. Let's take a look at it. Page 4. A Psalm of David. God is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He lies me down in green meadows. He leads me beside still waters. He calms my soul. He leads me upon upright paths to show his care. Even when I walk in the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You know what staff means? Your staff means like your stick. You know, your stick, which means when you hit me, when you hurt me, that also comforts me. He meant to say that, even when you punish me, God, I feel that you care about me. Kind of like a parent who gives a kid a patch, right, for misbehaving. If a parent wouldn't care about the kid, then you wouldn't give him a patch. The fact that you gave a patch means that you care. So David is recognizing that. He says, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. I'm confident that you will set a table before me in front of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, meaning granted me kingship. You have filled my cup, assured me great power. May only goodness and kindness follow me all the days of my life. May I sit in the house of God for many long years. What do these prayers have in common? The prayer of David and the prayer of Hannah. How do they differ? How do they contrast? Any comments? Hannah is asking for something very, very specific. She's got a very urgent need. How about David? Did he have an urgent need? Is he's sort of kind of thankful. Yeah, I mean he's thankful, but he's just sort of chatting. He's not asking for anything specific, right? You know, how many of us think of prayer only as asking for things? And if I don't have anything to ask for, then Rabbi, why do I need to pray? I'm good. I've got 2 houses, 3 cars. You know, I've got 2 golf club memberships. I'm good. I don't need anything. I'm happy, right? David is praying over here without any supplication, right? Any other differences? Hannah's state of mind is desperate, and David, calm, serene. A third difference is that Hannah speaks of God in a very different manner as David does. She speaks of God, of the many heavenly and worldly beings. She's calling from afar. David is very different. He says, for you are with me. I'm confident that you will set a table before me. It's very close. David's prayer is very personal. Hannah's prayer is very distant, right? So these prayers really have very little in common with each other. But one thing that they do have in common, can you pick it up? What is it that they do have very much in common? What is it that David's prayer shares with Hannah's prayer, despite all their differences? Focus on
what was deep in their heart.
Focusing on what was deep in their heart, exactly. So for Hannah, what happened to be her issue was her infertility. For David, what was on his heart wasn't necessarily a problem. He was just venting. He was just sharing deep feelings. In both cases, both Hannah and David are expressing intimate feelings. That's what they have in common. Indeed, prayer, the essence of prayer is about opening up your personal voice and your own feelings. Both of them, Hannah and David, I feel, are both expressing their vulnerability. You know how people often say, I got this, I'm good, I don't need any help, right? We like to give this air of being capable for the people around us, certainly for the people beneath us, maybe like our employees or our children or our dependents. We want to certainly give people the impression that we got this, we're good. But prayer is our opportunity, as we see from Hannah and David, to be honest, to be real, to remove that air of falsehood, and to come out of our shells and to say things like it is. You know, God, I really need help. I can't have a kid. Or God, I'm expressing to you my deep emotions over here. Prayer is a very intimate, private, and safe space where it's okay to let go. It's okay to say it like it is. The question is, if what I'm saying is what prayer really is, then the prayer that you experience when you come to shul and you open up a prayer book is so impersonal. If you think about it, right? If prayer is so private, like I'm just describing, then what is it? How can you possibly walk into a synagogue and somebody hand you a prayer book and say, here, pray? What am I supposed to? I'm supposed to pray somebody else's intimate feelings? How's that even possible? Right? David was deeply unique, his prayer. Hannah was deeply unique, her prayer. How can you possibly pray out of a prayer book? If this is a prayer, it's almost like we've lost the plot. We've over-commercialized Judaism almost, to the point that we've forgotten that prayer's got to be personal. Right? We'll deal with that, hopefully, for sure, by the end of this discussion today, in a few minutes. But I just want to develop this theme. So here we are, talking about how prayer is private and personal. Is everybody okay with this so far? We're okay with prayer being meaningful, personal, all about me, right? How I feel, me coming out of my shell. We're okay with this, right? So far, so good, right? Okay. So, what happens if I'm not really interested in asking for something? What happens if I don't need anything? What happens if I have nothing to ask for? Oh, so Corey would say that's where gratitude comes in.
For what you do have. Oh, being thankful. That's the same thing.
Gratitude, thankful, right? So what happens if you have nothing to be thankful for? You're just good. Corey, what happens if you're just good? You're not thankful. I don't need to be thankful. I did this by myself.
No.
No, you're not good at that. Okay. So,
You don't want it to go away, so you thank every day, so you hope that whatever blessings you have stay with you.
right. Yes. Well, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, ma'am?
Door.
Dory, of course, yeah.
Pray for someone else.
You can pray for someone else. What happens if you don't need to pray for someone else? Everybody I know is good. You know, it's fascinating. Hebrew is the holy tongue. It's a holy language. There's no such thing in Hebrew as a word that isn't related to the soul of what it names. If something has, whatever the name of something is related to the essence of that thing. Like in English, in T-A-B-L-E. What does T-A-B-L-E have to do with this structure? Nothing. It's consensus. It's arbitrary consensus. And C-H-A-I-R is the thing you sit on by consensus. But in Hebrew, the name of everything is very, very precise. I'll illustrate. What does the word prayer actually mean? In English. What is the origin of the word prayer?
Blessing?
No.
You mean tefillah or prayer?
Prayer in English. The word prayer. P-A-P-R-A-Y-E-R. Yes.
I don't know, I'm giving you a guess.
Yeah.
I've never heard it, but it has the word ray in it, and rays are focus. So rays of light, like from the sun, are focus.
You're doing a Hebrew on the English language now.
That's right.
You're looking at the root of the word. In Hebrew, you have shoresh, which means the root. You can't do a Hebrew on the English language, but it's a nice try, though. I like it. Very creative. The root of the etymology of the English word prayer comes from the word precarious, which means to beseech, Ron, just like you said. To beseech, to ask. My Latin's a little dusty, but precarious, last time I checked, means to beseech, to ask for, to request things.
It says address a solemn request.
Address a solemn request. Good. So you're basically begging. Prayer means begging, right? Not very attractive, right? That's prayer. But in Hebrew, it means something entirely different. In Hebrew, the word tefillah in Hebrew means to connect. Let me prove it to you. You ready? So take a look at text 4a, please. So text 4a here in the Mishnah, this is the oral law. It says as follows. It's talking about the law of ritual purity and impurity, which has nothing to do with what we're talking about today. But it says that the verb is hatofel kli cheres. It's talking about somebody who attaches something to the outside, attaches clay to the outside of a clay vessel. So you got a coffee cup and you attach some clay to the outside of the coffee cup. That word attach is tofel. Look at the spelling in 4a. It's exactly the same spelling. Taf, pei, lamed. When you attach something to an existing object, that is the meaning of the word prayer. Which means that prayer in English means to beg for things, but in Hebrew, tefillah means to connect. just like you would connect with someone you love. I often tell people in relationships, marriages, that I counsel, that you've got to spend time together. But what are we going to talk about, Rabbi? Doesn't matter what you're going to talk about. It's not a business meeting. There's no agenda for your conversation. Okay, we're having a Monday date now, Monday lunch. We're going to cover 4 items on the agenda today. No, that's not what you do when you love someone. That's when you do when you want something from someone. If you're having a business meeting and I need to know what you're selling me or what I'm going to pay you, we're going to go through an agenda. But if it's someone that I love, you just want to spend time together. It's very, very important that the time spent together brings you closer. What are we going to talk about? Doesn't matter. Just do things. Hang out. Just hang out together. When it comes to a relationship which is not loving, the meeting is all about what I can get from you. But when it comes to a relationship that is loving, it's about us just being together, spending time together. It's not about the result. And that's the meaning of hatofel. Tefillah is a time when we connect with God. That's what we're doing. We are connecting with God just like you would with your loving spouse or your child or your mother. You just want to spend time together, being together. You're connecting. It's not about asking. It's about being. Because this is a relationship which is important to me. This is something which I cherish and I value. You know, couples that don't spend time together doing things, they tend to be like 2 ships just drifting in the ocean, and they sort of cross each other once in a while. And the less they connect, the further they drift apart. That's why it's so important to always come together. Because when you spend time together, that's when you're with each other, you're good. And that's why it's so important for us to daven every day. Why do we daven every day? Because if we don't, just like you have your weekly date with your spouse, or your daily cup of coffee with your wife or your husband, just to connect, that's what we're doing with our God. That's the purpose of it's hard for me to call it prayer. I never liked that word prayer. I'm going to call it daven.
Yeah, but daven is Yiddish.
Davening is Yiddish.
And what does that mean?
Okay, so I'm going to explain the word davening in a few minutes. You want to know that too? I'm going to explain that in a few minutes because I'm going to develop that theme.
Yeah.
I'm going to expand that in a few minutes. But the word prayer, as defined already, is a very difficult word. Because it's not just a bad translation, by the way. When we say that prayer is begging, I remember I was a 6-year-old kid, and if some people came to our house Friday night for dinner, to my parents' house, and they looked at me, and they were like the 6-year-old kid, the rabbi's son, and they said to me, "No, so did you went to this shul with your father?" And I said, "Yeah." And what did you pray for? They're asking me, a 6-year-old kid, "What did you pray for?" And I'm like, "I didn't pray for anything. I davened." I remember clearly saying this answer. I didn't pray for anything. I davened. And I think this is what I meant when I was 6 years old. I wasn't begging. I didn't go there to have a request session 3 times a day. Right? You know, if God didn't give me what I asked for him yesterday and what I asked him 2 days ago, then why should I ask him again? I mean, this is just an exercise in futility. Right? That's not what prayer is about. It's not just a bad translation. It's actually the exact opposite of the meaning of tefillah. You see, when you ask for something from someone else, it's a dispassionate relationship. It's a business relationship. The English translation of precarious, of prayer, means that this is not about us. It's actually not even about me. Because when I'm asking someone else for something, it's really all about them being kind enough to make space for me. I'm not really featuring in this picture here. It's about them, whether they big enough, good enough to give me what I want or not. That's some sort of a business relationship. But tefillah means a personal, loving, meaningful relationship. It's not about the result. It's about the connection.
Why can't I connect at home?
You can. Hold on. Yeah, you can, absolutely. And you should, based on what we just said. You absolutely should connect at home. Didn't somebody say a moment ago that they pray while they're davening while you walk your dog? Great, good for you. If that's your time where you can connect, where you can feel intimate with God, good for you. Keep it up. Right? The question is, what are we doing in shul? So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that soon. Okay. So I just want to take a look at text 4b to give some wording here to this concept. Text 4b, this is the explanation from the Rebbe. Page 7. The English word prayer would be best translated into Hebrew as bakasha, which means a request. Yet in Jewish tradition, the Hebrew word, the word tefillah is preferred. Indeed, these two words, bakasha and tefillah, imply two very different concepts. While bakasha means to request, bakasha, you know how you say bevakasha? You know when you say in Hebrew, everybody knows this word. Bevakasha means please, right? Bevakasha is a request, right? So when you ask for something, you say bevakasha, please. Bevakasha means give me something, please, right? So bakasha means to request. Tefillah means to connect. Bakasha implies that prayer is a request of God to grant us something we may be lacking. Were we to neither lack nor desire anything, prayer in the sense of bakasha would have absolutely no place. I have no use for prayer if I'm good. If I've got healthy retirement accounts, I got a good medical record, my kids are all happy, I'm good. I don't need to pray. But tefillah, however, implies connecting with God. This is something applicable to all people at all times. Even if you have everything. Even for a person who lacks nothing, prayer in its fullest sense is still relevant. For prayer isn't only about making requests. Rather, it's primarily about renewing the connection between an individual and God. The way I see it is that prayer is a transformative experience. It's an opportunity for me to be my true self. While I'm faking it to the rest of the world all day long, I'm putting on airs. The one time that I can connect to who I truly am, that happens when I daven. And this is a very, very important concept to connect, as this, as is obviously apparent in any relationship. But the value of connecting is depicted in an analogy by the Baal Shem Tov, a beautiful analogy of how important it is to connect. Let's take a look at this on page 5. I want to show you in the words of the Baal Shem Tov. He says he gives us an analogy of a king who once decreed that on his day of celebration, anyone who would request anything from him would have their request granted. One person asked for power and glory. Another asked for wealth. Each person's request was granted. There was one wise man who requested that he'd be given the opportunity to speak with the king 3 times a day. He wanted access. Not power, no wealth. He just wanted access. Connection. The king was very impressed that this man valued speaking with him more than the riches and glory. The king therefore fulfilled this man's request and allowed him to enter his chamber thrice daily to speak with him. The king also gave the man access to his treasuries, bestowing him with riches and glory as well. The analogy is very beautiful in the sense that the king realized that the first other people, they cared only about themselves. They didn't care about the king. The one who wanted to connect to the king, that's the one who truly loved the king, and that's the one who was rewarded. That's the one who was interested in a relationship, and that's what tefillah is all about. Right? Imagine your relationship with your wife was all about what you can get from her. Can you imagine? What kind of relationship there? Well, he makes money. Okay, I guess I could rough this out for the next 55 years, right? Or she's good looking, right? That's not a reason to live with someone. When you love that person, you just want to be together. It's not about what they can do for you. It's about who we are as one unit. And that's what prayer, what tefillah is really all about. Okay, so let's take this to the next level. So we discussed that prayer, tefillah, means connecting. It's deeply personal. It's about being vulnerable and expressing your own thoughts, your own intimate feelings. But what happens if I'm a little too materialistic for this, right? I'm too practical to express those kinds of feelings, right? Even if it's personal, maybe I just don't need it. Right? Maybe I just don't need it. Can anybody relate to that? Do you feel the need to connect intimately? Right? You do feel that you want to connect? So you don't struggle with this problem, anybody? No? You good? So you feel that this is definitely something you want to do. You definitely want to connect intimately with your higher power. Good. Okay, good. So let's just, for those of us who might be a little bit more embarrassed to say that they're too materialistic, let's just develop this theme a little bit. I want you to take a look in the book at exercise 1.2, please. It's just a list of 6 questions. 6 questions which I just want you to fill out on answering 1, 2, 3, or 4. There are 6 statements. And I just want you to write your answer 1, 2, 3, or 4. 1 being never, 2 is occasionally, 3 is often, and 4 is always. Right? So 1 would be no, not at all, and 4 would be always. If you could just write your answer in there, I'd be curious to see, for you to express your answers in this. Again, it's private. You don't have to answer if you don't want to. Very interesting. Okay, great. So your answers are private. They are your own personal answers. But you know what I found as I walked around the room? Fascinating. That I found that as I look at your answers, that say for a very few, everyone's answers are staggered. 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6 are on opposite scales, opposite sides. Which means they're the same question, by the way. 1 and 2 is the same question. 3 and 4 is the same question. 5 and 6 is the same question. Right? But they just worded differently. Yet you still answered opposite answers. Why is that? Because we are multifaceted beings. We're not one-dimensional. We're multi-dimensional. If you answered staggered, you're good. Don't worry about it. Don't feel bad that you're some sort of a schizophrenic. It's okay. It's good. Because if we only had one inclination, if you were either good or bad, if you were either selfish or selfless, you'd be confused if you wrote different answers. But the fact of the matter is that we have 2 conflicting forces within us. We have both a selfless soul as well as a selfish soul within us, fighting over us at the same time. Which is why the careful wording of these questions was deliberately designed to bring out how we're constantly in conflict. We're drawn towards selflessness and we're drawn to selfishness. We have a godly soul and we have an animal soul. We all have a dichotomy within us. These souls make us who we are. They are very core to our identity. If you think about it, I'm not my fingers and my toes. I'm not my kneecaps and my shoulder blades. I'm actually my inclinations and my ambitions. That's who I am. In Kabbalistic parlance, in the words of the Tanya, we are 2 souls in perpetual conflict. We are a constant dichotomy with ourselves. A godly soul and an animal soul schlepping in a tug of war all the time. If we aren't engaging these souls, then we're not in touch with who we are. We're not in touch with ourselves. If we're not in touch with these souls, then there's like 97% of us, of me, that is being neglected. I mean, I use 97%, but there's a very strong portion of who we are that is being neglected. And therefore, when we speak about tefillah as the opportunity to personally be me, to find my personal voice, to express myself to God, my intimate self to God, it's not good enough to say that I'm a materialistic person. You have to be in touch with your spiritual sense of self. Otherwise, you're ignoring a major component of who you are. You can't just say, well, I play golf and bridge and, I don't know, and I go every night out to a restaurant, so I don't have any problems. That's not enough. It's too materialistic a way of living, which is out of touch with who you are. You need tefillah, not because God needs it. You need tefillah because you need to be able to have the opportunity to express yourself. Now, these two souls have a very different approach to tefillah. The two souls have a very different approach. There's the godly soul and there's the animal soul. Now, as you can imagine, the godly soul is like a fish in water when it comes to prayer, when it comes to tefillah. The godly soul loves it. This is an opportunity for me to talk to my core. Right? The godly soul is a piece of God. It wants to talk to God. It's great, terrific. It's an opportunity for me to come home. Right? This is the godly soul. It's like you plug in your cell phone. It just revitalizes it, juices it up. It gives me everything that I need. This is my time to reconnect with who I really am. You know, my godly soul is constantly it's living in a physical human body. It's like in exile. You know, it's like it's been sent so far away from its state of origin. It's like, imagine one of us being sent to live in a mud hut in Swaziland. It would be really uncomfortable. Imagine once a day for half an hour you had the opportunity to FaceTime with civilization back in Palm Beach Gardens, you know? That'd be great. You'd feel like, breath of fresh air. Terrific, right? So that's what the godly soul feels when it experiences tefillah. It's the opportunity, even though I live out in Swaziland, I live out on planet Earth, which is so far away from the godly reality from whence our godly soul originates, it has the opportunity to feel at home. It's great. Loves it. The tefillah activates our souls, our godly soul, though we might not be familiar with our godly soul just yet, right? It allows us, at least we can be aware of the presence of our godly soul, and we can slowly come to realize that it is part and parcel, a very important component of who we are. And that is what's being activated when we daven. Right? The godly soul needs prayer like oxygen. Again, not because it needs to ask for things. By the way, send me a toothbrush and fill up my charge card, right? That's not the purpose of why the godly soul would want to daven. The godly soul would daven because it just wants to connect. It wants to recharge. But the animal soul, how do you think the animal soul reacts to this? Our animal soul, which is self-centered, it's egocentric. How would the animal soul react to the opportunity to converse with the divine?
It would do everything it possibly could to talk you out of it.
It would do everything it possibly could to talk you out of it. Yeah. At the very least, it's uninterested.
Yeah.
Right? Right? At the very least, your animal soul would not be interested and would fight against you. I think somebody said earlier that, somebody mentioned this. What?
Conflict.
It's a time, right. And indeed, the Zohar, the book of Kabbalah, tells us that prayer is a time of war. It's a time of intimacy when it comes to your godly soul, but when it comes to your animal soul, it's a time of war. Look at the text over here on text number 6. Straight from the Zohar. The time of prayer is a time of war. Why? I just want to show you just before that a quick moment here. Just back to the godly soul a moment. On text number 5, I thought this was important to share. On text number 5, just to finish up with the godly soul, page 10. Every Jew possesses a godly soul that is connected to God, but due to the soul's descent and investment into the body, the soul becomes bogged down by the body's needs, like eating and drinking. It becomes, materialized. Over time, this weakens the godly soul's connection to God. You live too long in Swaziland, you start to dress in a loincloth. It's like everybody else. That's what they do. The daily times of prayer, meaning connection, serve to renew and strengthen the godly soul's connection with God. So that's great for the godly soul. But for the animal soul now, struggling, it's a time of war. Why would it be a time of war? Because there's a cognitive dissonance here. The godly soul is God-centered. It's all about its origin, which is from God. But the animal soul is ego-centered. And it doesn't really want to be vulnerable. An ego doesn't want to be vulnerable. Right? It doesn't want to be intimate and to express itself to, who are you anyways? Who am I talking to? Right? The animal soul would be like, I don't even know if anybody's really listening to me. Why would I be wanting to be intimate with some godly being which is not the core of the animal soul? But what's interesting is that the reason that our godly soul was sent into this world was in order to engage the animal soul in just this battle. Take a look in text number 7, page 11. The purpose of the godly soul's descent into the body is to influence the animal soul and to refine its natural habits. The days of a person's life are numbered according to the time it takes to complete this job. How long you live, how much time you have, is determined based upon how much of a wilde chaya is your animal soul. It's like riding a rodeo, in what are those things, those bronco things? Yeah. Right? You got to tame this, what is that even? It's a bull. You got to tame that bull, right? So you got to find a way to tame that bull. This might take 75 years, it might take 120 years. Depending on how much time they figure that you need is how much time that you've been given from heaven to fulfill your mission in this world, to tame your animal. That's your mission in this world. What would be a tamed animal, for example? When you have an animal which is on a yoke, like an ox on a yoke, and it's threshing the field, now you're harnessing the strength, the unique energy of the ox to service civilization. That's great. So now you've tamed the ox. But when it's a wild bronco, you're in trouble, right? This is our soul's purpose in this world. The godly soul didn't come to this world to fix itself. It was perfectly fine up in heaven. It was sent as a special forces mission to a very faraway place called planet Earth, the lowest spiritual world. And here, our mission is to refine and tame our animal soul. How do we do that? The influencing of the animal soul occurs primarily through the service of prayer. The one time that you're able to truly control or harness or tame your animal soul, your wilde chaya, that happens not through having nice kosher meals or through doing a mitzvah even, or just being a mensch and saying please and thank you. It happens through tefillah, through the communication with God. But to do that, we said that it's a battle, right? So the time of prayer is the time of a battle, because the animal soul is not interested. It doesn't want to be intimate with God. Again, when we look at the Hebrew word for battle, we find something very interesting. How do you say battle in Hebrew? What was that?
Milchama.
Milchama is one word, or krav. Milchama is a war. But a battle is more of a krav, right? So when we look at the word krav, it means war. Did I say war? Whatever. When I say krav, it means war. But the word krav is also rooted. The root of the word is karov, which means close. Through the time of prayer, through the time of battle, is actually when you're going to be able to engage your animal soul, to make your animal into a mensch, to refine yourself. Remember, your animal soul is not something separate from you. It's a part of you. It's a very important part of you. And if you're going to refine, if you're going to experience self-refinement, that's going to happen through the battle, the closeness of prayer. Let's look at that in the text over here. What that means is, based just before the text, what that means is that just like people that are fighting in a war, well, at least in the olden days, they used to fight hand-to-hand combat, right? They would have to, ironically, in order to hurt each other, they would have to come physically close to each other, right? So too, when it comes to the war between the godly soul and the animal soul. It's their closeness that helps the godly soul overwhelm and uplift and inspire the animal soul. Let's take a look at that on page 12. So this is how the Rebbe explains it. War is referred to as krav, which shares the same Hebrew letters as the word kiruv, closeness. This is ironic, for war is the opposite of closeness. The explanation is as follows. In war, each of the two sides wishes to triumph over the other and subject it to its rule. To do so, the two sides must come in close contact. This explains the connection between the words kerav, war, and kiruv, closeness. The same is true of the war between the godly and the animal souls, which happens primarily during prayer. Hence, the time of prayer is a time of war. For the godly soul to subjugate the animal soul, bringing it to a love of God with both your hearts, is what we say in the Shema. The way to do that, the godly soul must take the animal soul into close consideration. Practically speaking, this means meditating in a way that the animal soul will also be able to understand. In order to refine and uplift our animal soul through the battle of prayer, you're going to have to engage the animal soul like in conversation. You're going to have a chat, like a negotiation. You're going to have to talk to the animal soul. It's going to require meditation. And that's why you'll notice that much of the prayers in the Jewish prayer book, in the Siddur, are actually meditations. That's what they are. They're meditations. Anytime you open the prayer book, the vast majority of the prayer book is not requests for anything. There's one time in davening, when we do the silent Amidah, that's when you request stuff. There's 18 things that you ask for, okay, and whatever else you want to ask for. But the 95% of prayer is actually meditations. It's not about asking for things. It's about realizing truths. Why are we doing this? Because we're engaging in a conversation with our animal soul. We're taking what we already understand from a level of Bina. I remember I described to you before the Chachma, Bina, Das, the 3 levels of Chabad, the 3 levels of intellectual assimilation. First you get the idea, then you understand the idea, right? But in order to make it personal, you have to meditate. That's when it becomes realized, right? So for example, you might know that God is the creator of the universe. That's nice, right? It's nice to know that God is the creator of the universe, right? But what does that mean to me? How does my life change knowing that God created the world 6,000 years ago? You know what happens when I meditate upon that? When I look at the words of the Siddur, and I'm sitting there and I'm reading these words, when I'm meditating upon these words, I say, you know what that means? That means that God created me. Wow, me? I didn't realize that I'm worthy of being created. I thought that I actually am not worthy. I'm not sure what I actually did to deserve to be created. A lot of people think that they're failures for various reasons, for many, many, many different reasons. So if I have a broken sense of self-esteem, then that realization, that meditation, that God not only created me, but He continues to sustain me through the doctrine of perpetual creation, which we don't need to talk about right now. But when we realize that God created me and He created my world, and the whole world is being created by God, you suddenly realize that God believes in me more than I believe in me. And that's very empowering. That's a very empowering realization. And suddenly you start to feel, wow, I wonder if there's actually a reason for me to be in this world other than just surviving. Maybe that God actually has a purpose for me to be in this world. And it's through these realizations, as we're about to do a meditation in a few minutes, it's through these realizations that you come to have a personal connection with God, that even your animal soul can say, you know what? I like this guy. This I can relate to. This is something that speaks to me. That's why it's critical to pray in a way that you can understand. Because if your entire prayer is in a foreign language, if you've not understood a single word of what you said, then you've had zero engagement with your animal soul. Like zero. You've had no intellectual back and forth with your animal soul. The war was lost even before it ever began. You've got to be able to engage in a dialogue, with like in a hostage negotiation situation. You're negotiating with your animal soul. But if you didn't understand a word, then what have you done? Nothing. Indeed, the rule is that tefillah belo kavanah, prayer without intent, ain't not tefillah, it's not prayer. If you've just read the words, you've mouthed the words, but you don't understand what you said, you've done nothing. Remember we said before, prayer has got to be personal. When it comes to the animal soul, it's got to be deeply relatable. You've got to be able to meditate. You've got to be able to fight this battle. The battle is fought through meditation, through understanding and through dialogue, through rational explanation. And that's something which you have to do every single day. Because, my animal soul today is very different to my animal soul yesterday. Because there's been all sorts of different challenges and problems and questions and things that my animal soul has had to deal with in the past few hours. And every day I need to calibrate my animal soul. I see it a lot like what I do to my car every few months, where I take it in for a service. I need to align the wheels. They get a little out of whack. You've been over too many bumps and they get a little out of whack and it ruins the whatever of the bottom of the car and the fuel consumption. Everything goes a little haywire if you don't align your wheels. You have to do a soul alignment in the same way that you have to do a car wheel alignment. It's interesting that they call it a service too. You got to service your car. You got to service your soul. But your car gets a lot less bumps than your soul does. Your soul gets a bump every time somebody talks to you or something happens or you read a headline or you see CNN or Fox News. Your soul experiences some sort of a jerk. And that's why we need to calibrate our soul on a far more regular basis. And this is the three levels of intellectual understanding. It's, we start with the idea. You understand the idea, but in order to take that idea from objective and make it subjective, to make it mine, I've got to meditate upon it every single day to deal with today's problems. It's not enough that I ate breakfast 6 months ago. I need to eat breakfast every single day to sustain my body. So if I've serviced my animal soul last Yom Kippur, it doesn't mean that it's good enough for today, because today I'm alive and breathing and I'm struggling. If I don't daven, if I don't pray, I'll be a little out of whack. Like we say in Yiddish, hinkerdik. I'll be like a little hunchbacked. I got to realign. I got to get back on track. And that's why there's a great story about that the previous Rebbe tells us about Reb Gershon Ber. It's actually in the book on page 14. Reb Gershon Ber was a chassid of a Chabad chassid of yesteryear, and he asked his rabbi here. He says he had a habit of translating his prayers into Yiddish. He would read the prayer in Hebrew, and then he would translate it into Yiddish. Can you imagine doing simultaneous translation? One line Hebrew, one line English. One line Hebrew, one line English, right? That's how he would daven. He once asked his rabbi, Reb Peretz, the rabbi of Neville, and later Chernigov, whether it was permissible to pray both in Hebrew and in Yiddish by translating the prayers as he went along. It's like, am I allowed to do this? So Reb Peretz asked him, why would you want to do this? And he says, my animal soul understands Yiddish better. That's why. My animal soul understands Yiddish better. What am I doing if I'm only mouthing words in Hebrew? I've done nothing. Now, somebody mentioned earlier at the very beginning of the class that praying in Hebrew, I think it was you, Susan, praying in Hebrew has certain vibrations to it. And that's true. And what we're not doing today, we're not going into the how of prayer. At the very back of the student textbook, you'll see that there's a whole manual we've prepared for you, which is about the details of prayer. How and when and what and who. And there's a whole section over there about praying in Hebrew and the importance of the vibrations that you described in Hebrew. Certain words you just cannot translate. You cannot translate, like prayer. Imagine translating a word, tefillah, into prayer. You've lost the whole soul of what we're talking about, right? That's why it's important to always have the original, right? So you got to be careful not to stray too far away from the Hebrew. But if all you're doing is the Hebrew and you're not doing the English, if you're not davening in a way that is meaningful to you, you're in real trouble. You've lost the whole purpose of the personal, meaningful, deeply intimate component, which is the lion's share of what davening really is. And I say to you, don't lose the forest because of the trees. Don't lose the soul of prayer because of all the rituals. Stand up, sit down, move along, 3 steps forward, 3 steps backwards, cover your eyes. Don't cover your eyes. Don't lose the forest because of the trees. The trees are the details, and they're good to give you markers and guide you along the way. But if your prayer is all about when to stand and when to sit and when to move like this and when to move like that, you've lost the whole point. You've lost the forest for the trees. You've always got to remember what's going on over here. The bigger picture is that this is a deeply meaningful, deeply personal connection with myself. Myself expressing in which part of myself? The parts of myself which I might not be totally familiar with, and those parts of myself are my godly soul as well as my animal soul, both of whom need to be engaged in prayer, because all of me loves all of you, right? Where do you think he got it from? Right? All of me is being engaged. Imagine living a life where you're not in touch with your soul. Can you imagine a person who lives his life and all he cares about is money? Only money, that's it. It's like a soulless life. It's a shell, it's a shame, it's a shanda, right? Imagine somebody who never loved. What a shame, right? And then imagine somebody who all they love, but they only love themselves, right? That's like a narcissistic love. They're also out of touch with their core. You've got to recognize, you've got to embrace and identify all of me in order to truly be alive. That includes both my godly soul as well as my animal soul, both of whom come to be engaged no other time of my day as much as when I pray. The time of battle, the time of intimate connection. And this is how I understand the word daven. The word daven is an interesting word, and it's a little unclear exactly where it comes from. But my understanding is that it's not prayer, it's not beseeching, right? But to daven means to, like, weigh. There's one of the roots of daven is to groan. It's to krecht, it's like kvetch. It's to struggle. That's what it means to daven, to calibrate. That's my understanding. It's a soul alignment, like a groan. You know when you like push things into place, right? There's a root for davening and groan.
Why not just use the Hebrew one?
You're right, but we got to understand the word daven. We have to understand where it comes from. It's a little unclear. I'm still looking further into it. But the word generally means to groan because you're aligning yourself through this cognitive dissonance, which we all suffer from, and it gives us comfort. Puts us at peace. Like someone said earlier at the very beginning of the class, peace with yourself. Shalom with yourself, with all of myself is what's being engaged at the time of prayer. And that's what davening is. So, just to wrap it up here before we get into the meditation. Why? And that's why it's important to pray in the vernacular, in your own language, right? When you understand. So why do we need to use a template? If prayer is so deeply personal, why do I need a book? Why can't I just pray like David and Hannah? You know why? We live in a culture, in a society today, where you want a piece of meat, you know where you get meat from? Publix. Not even a butcher. You know where you get toys from? Publix. Amazon, right? Where do you get anything? Anything you want, you click of a button and it comes to your door, right? We used to be an agrarian society. We used to be in a society that was in touch with putting a seed in the ground and watching it decompose and then watching it slowly grow as you water and you nurture, and you could see how life grows from nothing. We used to be in touch with ourselves. But today we're so advanced and so technologically sophisticated and connected that we're connected with everybody else. We're just disconnected from ourselves and our core. And that's why in our generation we're less eloquent when it comes to expressing our true self. In previous generations, they were able to have more extemporaneous prayer. But today you ask someone to give a blessing, they're like, I don't know, what am I supposed to say? Just express yourself. If you're in touch with your deep core, you know what people want, you know what people need, you know what you need, and you can express it. But if you're not in touch with yourself, if you're just sort of living a shallow existence, then it's difficult to find those words. And that's why it's important to buy a Hallmark card. I'm serious. Why would you buy a Hallmark card? What kind of business is it? I'm serious. It's your wife's 50th birthday. You couldn't write something yourself? No. You know, you bought a Hallmark card. And what did you do? You personalized it. Right? They said it so nicely. And you got to admit, they really did. They're professionals, right? They said it so nicely. But imagine you gave your wife for her 50th birthday. Your 50th anniversary, okay? 50th anniversary, you bought a Hallmark card and you just gave her the card. How would that go well? Go over? Not too well, I think. But I bought it. It's a thought. Look what it says. Yes, but you didn't write it, right? What you do is you take a Hallmark card and then you add to it. You run with the theme over here. They start you off, right? They get your juices flowing and then you can start sort of, you're kind of in the groove already. And you had better personalize that message if you value your life and your marriage, right? So prayer is just like a Hallmark card. The sitter is like a Hallmark card. Because yes, and you should pray in your own language, and you should do it in your own way. But so many of us are like a donkey staring at the moon. We don't know, how do you talk to God? God is so ethereal, abstract, and removed. I'm not even sure how to do it. King David gives us the book of Psalms. And he gives us these beautiful prose, these poems and these meditations are beautiful. But if you sit there and you just read the words and then you close the book and you leave, you're like the guy who gave his wife a Hallmark card and didn't sign it. What you need to do is you need to take the book and make it yours. Meditate upon it. And when you meditate upon it, now you feel it. Now you've spoken to God. Let's take a look at one prayer. One prayer. I want to do today one prayer which will encapsulate the meditation of what we've learned here today. Okay? Here it is. This is a prayer we say at the very beginning of the day when we start off our day. Okay? And after this, we're going to do the labor wolf meditation. So I'm just going to show you this. This, Elokai Neshama, it's like on page 1 of the prayer book. By the way, if anybody wants to buy a prayer book, I want to encourage you to buy one. We have here in the office, just tell Ashley, you can buy your own prayer book, and through this course, we'll establish a more meaningful and personal connection to the prayer book as we'll be opening it up, right? So I want to encourage you to buy it. It's not too expensive, just a book. But let's take a look at this one, which appears on page 2 of the prayer book, or page 1. One of the first things we say in the morning, we say, the soul you have placed within me is pure. Now this is like a Hallmark card. Somebody else wrote this, right? But it's actually really beautiful. You see, the first thing that you see when the soul you have placed within me is pure, is suddenly you realize that there's a godly soul within me. Now, what does it mean the soul you have placed within me? Who's me? There's the godly soul placed within me. So there's like 2 of me, right? There's the godly soul placed within me, and then there's within me. So right away you see there's 2 parts to me. You see there's my godly soul and then there's my animal soul. And you realize that that's my identity.
It doesn't start with my God. It should be my God. Neshama Shanasata Vita Ora.
I'm sorry, it should start with what?
Elokai Neshama.
We're addressing God. We're addressing God. We're talking to God. We're saying to God, the soul that you have. I'm not doing the whole prayer, just a portion of the prayer, right? So this is the godly soul, which is infused inside of the animal soul. And we say you created it, you formed it, you breathed it within me. What that means is that we suddenly, and each of us can interpret this in our own way to make it our personal Hallmark card. But we say that we start to realize that this soul is a part of me, to the point that if I'm not engaging it, I'm not truly living. I'm not truly fulfilled. I'm only living a very peripheral part of my identity. It's breathed within me. It's part of me, right? and I have a mission to fulfill in this world. What is that mission? You guard it within me, and you'll eventually take it away from me because it's only here for a specific amount of time. It's only here as long as it's been deemed necessary to be able to tame and refine, to sublimate and inspire my animal soul. Right? And how does that happen? How can I tame my animal soul? We said, where do you do that? Through the war, through the meditation, through the negotiation, the conversation of prayer. As long as that soul is within me, I will thank you, my God. Thank you is that personal conversation when I pray to God. That happens through prayer. So I wanted you to see that everything that we've learned here today is really encapsulated inside of this prayer, which is on page 2 of the prayer book, and you could have easily read through it and you're whipped through it, depending on how quick your Hebrew reading is, 10 words a minute or 100 words a minute, doesn't make a difference. But if you haven't felt it, you've totally missed the boat. I just want to make sure that we spend a few moments with Label Wolf right now, taking what we've learned here today into a meaningful meditation.
Thank you very much for being part of the series. I look forward to spending time together with you. I'm going to be running the meditation component for this series of lessons. In 1979, the Rabbi gave a celebrated sikha, a public discourse, on the need to introduce a kosher format of Jewish meditation because so many were turning to Eastern meditations. He asked for therapists, rabbis, other specialists to begin to develop such programs. As I had always been involved in the Rebbe's campaigns, I wanted very much to undertake this one as well. So I interested myself in meditation, and then I developed a series of techniques and courses, which I sent to the Rebbe for approval, and each time received an approval. The use of meditation before prayer and during prayer, and the way to gain insight to create behavioral change. This is what you and I are going to be spending the next several sessions being involved in as part of your lessons. How to use meditation in context of prayer as such. I look forward to continuing this journey with you and learning together with you. The prayer we're going to focus on in this lesson is entitled Elokei Neshama Shenosatobi Tehirahi. Prayer is a time where we exercise the spiritual martial art of being able to tame our animalistic self. And we'll focus on this particular discipline of taking the duality within and unifying it. Let us prepare for the meditation component by gently closing your eyes and focusing on your breath, just becoming aware of the breath entering your nostrils and exiting from your nostrils, trying to breathe through the nose. Become aware of cooler air entering your nostrils and warmer air exiting. And focus for a moment on that temperature differential. Become aware of the breath entering the nostrils and then coursing its way down to the cavity of the lungs, feeling the air enter and spread. And now shift your focus to your blood flow and become aware of the blood coursing throughout the body, carrying nutrients and goodness, animating your physical body. focus on your brain and recognize and sense the flow of instructions from the brain to different parts of the body, a communication system down to the end of your toes. Trace it with your mind, the proliferation of pathways. Now become aware, just above your head, a point at which the flow of divine energy enters your head and spreads throughout your body. See it as a white light, narrow beam entering from the top of your head, down through your neck, and the light dispersing and spreading throughout your body. Divine light, the neshama, the soul. And as you observe that white light of goodness spreading through your body, become aware of an obstacle, a gateway, somewhere that blocks the pathway of that divine light. Let's call that blockage the nefesh bahamis, an animalistic, self-centered, ego-oriented part of self that tries to block the flow of white goodness, which is the nature of creation, and allow the white light to dominate, overcome it, allowing the whiteness to paint the blockage and make it disappear so that you can feel good, part of the divine, and recognize the essential nature of who you are. Tahirahi, complete purity. Focus again on your breath now. Breath entering your nostrils, cooler air entering, warmer air exiting. Begin moving your fingers and your toes. Right here in the room, move your fingers, move your toes, and when you're ready, gently open your eyes, coming all the way back. That's our meditation for this session.
I'd like to give you a little homework for this week, and that is to try to find 60 seconds in your day to connect meaningfully, personally with God. It might be while walking your dog, it might be while you're washing the dishes, or just sipping a cup of coffee. But try to make that moment your personal moment with God. Be like David, expressing his emotion. Be like Hannah, expressing hers. Let it out. Have a chat. Talk to God. See how it goes. And we'll hear your feedback on that next week. I just want to summarize with a quick review video.
Lesson 1. Out of the foxhole. 1. Prayer is deeply personal and profoundly individualistic. It is the way a person expresses their deepest thoughts and feelings in conversation to God. the rituals associated with prayer aren't intended to diminish this. 2. The word tefillah implies that there is more to prayer than just asking God for things. Prayer is also a time to connect. Even if a person feels that there's nothing they need to tell God, prayer, in the sense of connection, is still relevant to them. This developing one's connection with God is one of the goals of daily prayer. 3. Each individual possesses two souls, one godly and the other animalistic. These souls are extremely different in nature. Prayer, connecting with God, is for both of them. 4. The godly soul is a stranger in this world. It yearns for spiritual experience and closeness to God. Prayer is its chance. Prayer nourishes the godly soul and fills it with spiritual stamina. 5. The godly soul has a mission: to elevate the animal soul it shares the body with. This is primarily achieved through prayer. Simply put, this means thinking about God in practical and relevant terms, which resonate with the animal soul. 6. The prayer book is intended to facilitate, not replace personal prayer. It is meant to guide our thoughts and articulate our feelings. When we use it properly, its words become our own. Next week, in this lesson, we defined prayer in its broadest sense: connection with God. Next week, we're going to zone in on one specific and very common form of prayer: petition, making personal requests of God. Can we really change God's mind and influence His decisions? Doesn't He know best? How does prayer actually work? Through exploring the complex process that God employs to orchestrate the minute details of the world, the lesson will clarify the role that prayer plays in having our desires met. Along the way, the lesson will guide us to the most beneficial state of mind during prayer, and will explain why an infinite God is waiting for us to pray for our mortal needs.
In closing, I just want to thank everybody for joining us here this afternoon. It's really been a pleasure. I would love to hear your questions, but I want to just say this, that I hope that you've enjoyed this session, and that's going to be a transformative journey in making this extremely important part of our spirituality more accessible, more real, and more meaningful. I would love to hear your feedback. If you haven't yet signed up, then please, if you'd like to sign up, if you'd like to come back, then please do let Ashley know that she should order you a book for next week. And if you'd like to bring a friend, please bring a friend. So many of us are a little spiritually disenfranchised, and we all know someone like that. If you feel that somebody can benefit, then please bring them along just to check it out without any obligation. And with that, I want to thank you everybody for joining us today. I would love to hear your comments and questions. Please send me an email if you want, or you can talk right now. It's rabbi@jewishgardens.com is my email. I'll send you an email anyways. But thank you very much for joining me here. Shakur.